A lovely evening from us here in Mogadishu. Welcome to Somalia's premier number one station from news and updates. I'm your presenter Abdurrahman Yusuf. Tonight, we have prepared for you a lot, but first let's take a look at the stories that are making our headlines. Kenya plunged into chaos as violent protests erupt over soaring cost of living. First trial of senior government officials accused of corruption opens in Mogadishu. Somali Minister Defense hiring relatives, citing country's clan power-sharing system. Over 200 Al-Shabaab militants killed in a week-long operations in Somalia. Glad to have you back. Now let's delve into a full bulletin. Kenya has been rocked by Wednesday's clashes between the opposition protesters and police in various parts of the nation. The protests were brought by the rising cost of living and tax increases, which have made it difficult for many Kenyans to make ends meet. Kenya has been thrown into turmoil as opposition protesters clashed with police in several parts of the country on Wednesday. The demonstrations were sparked by the rising cost of living and tax hikes, which have left many Kenyans struggling to make ends meet. Local media reported that 5 people were injured in Nakuru town in the Rift Valley region, with 4 sustaining gunshot wounds. 2 others were shot and injured in Makueni in the east. Earlier, 3 people were taken to hospital in Migori in the west after being injured during the protests. Opposition leader Raila Odinga urged his supporters to end the protests at 17:00 local hour time and resume on Thursday. Mr. Odinga told the local Daily Nation newspaper website that the first day of a series of cost of living protests had been a success. In Nairobi city center and in other key towns, businesses remained shut and people stayed away for fear of getting caught in the protests. The violent clashes between the police and demonstrators have been condemned by both sides. The opposition Azimio coalition says some of their leaders and close allies, including some MPs and local area representatives, have been arrested, with Deputy Leader Martha Karua condemning their arrest without lawful justification. The opposition, Azimio coalition, says some of their leaders and close allies, including some MPs and local area representatives, have been arrested, with Deputy Leader Martha Karua condemning their arrest without lawful justification. President William Ruto, meanwhile, denounced the chaos and hooliganism during the protests and urged the opposition to find amicable ways to address their concerns. The protests highlight the growing public anger over the rising cost of living in Kenya, which has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the government tax hikes. The opposition has accused the government of mismanaging the economy. And failing to address the needs of the ordinary Kenyans. The situation in Kenya is worrying, and there are fears that the violence will escalate further. The officials appeared at Banadr Regional Court as the mention for their cases commenced. The trial comes as dozens of other officials are lined up for trial, some of whom have reportedly fled the country.
The trial of the first 4 senior government officials accused of corruption opened in Mogadishu on Thursday morning, marking a major milestone in the fight against corruption in Somalia. The officials appeared at Banadr Regional Court as the mention for their cases commenced. The trial comes as dozens of other officials are lined up for trial, some of whom have reportedly fled the country. Abdullahi Mohammed Osoble, Director of Immigration of the Department of Immigration and Naturalization; Umar Maalim Noor, Deputy Director of Foreign Affairs at Immigration and Naturalization Department; Sabir Hassan Abdinur, the head of Visa Extension and Verification in the Foreign Division of the Immigration and Naturalization; and Adan Mohammed Abdi, Director of Visa Issuance in the Immigration and Naturalization, are facing the charges of corruption, abuse of power, and misappropriation of public funds. The charges against the officials follow reports of widespread corruption in some government departments. The Attorney General has named dozens of officials for corruption-related accusations, and there have been calls for a crackdown on corruption in Somalia's government. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has urged those accused of corruption not to flee and has promised for a fair trial. Despite Somalia's progress in recent years, it remains one of the poorest countries in the world, and corruption has been a major impediment to its development. The government's efforts to tackle corruption have been met with resistance, with some officials accused of using their positions to amass wealth at the expense of the Somali people. As the trial continues, Somalis are hoping that it will mark the beginning of a new era of accountability and transparency in their new government.
Jibril Abdurrashid, Somalia's Minister of Trade, has caused controversy by announcing that he will employ members of his family and close friends as employees, citing the nation's 4.5 clan power sharing system. Abdurrashid made the announcement during a meeting with the Economics Committee of the Somali Parliament, where he confirmed that he has already employed 10 of his close relatives and plans to hire many more.
Somalia's Minister of Trade, Jibril Abdurrashid, has sparked controversy by announcing that he will hire members of his family and relatives as staff, citing the country's 4.5 clan power sharing system. Abdurrashid made the announcement during a meeting with the Economics Committee of the Somali Parliament, where he confirmed that he had already employed 10 of his close relatives and planned to hire many more. The move has triggered criticism from some Somali MPs, who have accused Abdurrashid of nepotism and undermining efforts to build a professional and merit-based civil service. Somali MP Mohammed Abdi Hayr Mareya called on the minister to retract his comments and abandon the plan to hire his relatives. Abdurrashid, however, defended his decision, saying that it was in line with the country's clan power sharing system, which allocates political power based on a formula that gives equal representation to 4 major clans and other smaller ones. He argued that hiring members of his clan was a way to ensure that they are fairly represented in the government and have a say in decision-making processes. The issue of nepotism and corruption within the Somali government has long been a contentious one. Critics say that the practice of hiring family members and relatives for government positions undermines the country's efforts to build accountable and transparent institutions, and that it perpetuates a culture of impunity and patronage. President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud has previously defended the practice, arguing that officials in the highest echelons of power have a constitutional right to employ their family members and relatives. He has also promised to tackle corruption and nepotism within the government, but progress has been slow. While the clan power sharing system is intended to ensure that all clans have a voice in the government, it has also been criticized for perpetuating divisions and excluding marginalized groups. As Somalia continues to grapple with a range of security, economic and governance challenges, addressing issues of corruption and nepotism within the government will be critical to building a more stable and prosperous future for the country.
Over 200 al-Shabaab militants, including senior leaders, have been killed by the Somali security forces with the assistance of foreign allies during a week-long operations in the regional states of Jubaland and Galmudug. The Minister of Defense, spokesperson General Abdullahi Ali Anod, said the joint operations took place on the 14th and 15th in the Maro area of Jubaland region, where 100 militants were killed. Somali security forces, supported by international partners, have killed more than 200 al-Shabaab militants, including senior leaders, in a week-long operation in Jubaland and Galmudug regional states. The Minister of Defense spokesperson General Abdullahi Ali Anod said the joint operations took place on the 14th and 15th in the Maro area of Jubaland region, where 100 militants were killed. Another operation in Ali Qura resulted in the death of 50 militants on Wednesday morning. The remaining militants were killed in separate operations. This marks the second time this year that the Somali government has announced the killing of over 200 militants. In March, Minister of Information, Culture and Tourism Daoud Awiz reported that more than 200 al-Shabaab fighters, including senior leaders, were killed in a 3-day operation in Hirshabelle, Galmudug and Jubaland states. The Somali government forces have been escalating their attacks against al-Shabaab since President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud declared an all-out war against the militants last year. The government has been struggling to assert control over large parts of the country, which have been under control of various armed groups, including al-Shabaab, for years. Al-Shabaab has been fighting to overthrow the Somali government and establish a strict Islamic state in the country for more than a decade. The group has been responsible for numerous attacks in Somalia and neighboring countries, including the 2013 Westgate shopping mall attack in Nairobi, Kenya, which killed 67 people. The Somali government has been working with international partners, including the United States, to combat the group. The US has been conducting drone strikes against al-Shabaab targets in Somalia since 2011 and provided training equipment to Somali security forces. The killing of senior leaders is a significant blow to al-Shabaab, which has been facing increasing pressure from the Somali government and international partners. However, the group is believed to have thousands of fighters and control over large parts of the country, particularly in rural areas. Lovely viewers, that brings us an end to our bulletin. Thank you for staying put. For more stories, stay put in our subsequent bulletins. I'm a presenter, Abdurrahman Yusuf, telling you, have yourselves a lovely night.